Hello, I'm Malcolm Haslett.
And I'm Janice Baker. Drinking and drug taking while planning to drive or use dangerous machinery,
or for that matter, texting on your phone, is clearly a recipe for disaster.
how does the testing work and what are we doing about educating offenders next time
On our time. Janice, and hello, have you ever been pulled over by the police?
Yes,
And?
I was fine.
Were you?
Yes, it was a drink driving, what do they call them, an RBT?
Well, we'll find out.
Yes, let's
because
find out.
we've got Senior Constable First Class Peter Thompson as our special guest. Peter, welcome to our
Hi,
time.
Peter.
Thank you very much. How are you guys?
Oh, we're good, but you know, the blow into the tube thing, because I'm not a drinking person at all, so blowing into the tube, I want to laugh, but I keep thinking, will it tell if I've got bad breath?
It certainly won't tell you if you've got bad breath. Definitely tell you if you've got alcohol.
Right, well, I haven't got either, I don't think.
I have to tell you when...
Shall we test his theory?
No.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I'm happy. Let me blow into something.
All right, so alcohol
You
testing.
don't have to put gloves on for me.
Oh,
I don't need you to dress up for me. I didn't wear any lace gloves.
We put gloves on for everyone when we're undertaking this procedure, particularly when we get to the drug testing,
I can understand
which
why.
we'll have a look at shortly.
Do you have to put them on for everybody, every
Every test,
time
yep, is a complete
New gloves.
complete change of gloves.
They're not easy to get on, obviously.
No, we have our moments. Right, so we apply a tube to the alcohol test, and this happens at the car window when we stop you at the roadside.
Right.
And what we do is, if you've got any, if you're drinking at the time, some people do, and not necessarily alcohol, but anything, drinking, smoking or eating, we get you to remove that from your mouth, and then
Spit that out.
because we don't want that,
I like that bit.
coming out all over the place.
I'm ready.
And then what we do is we get you to take a deep breath and blow. Stop. Too hard. So the test hasn't worked for us on this occasion.
So you were too keen.
So what we need you to do is take a deep breath, but blow slowly.
Blow slow.
Slowly.
Okay, I'm going to blow slow.
So we just need to reset the
Reset.
instrument, and away we go. Much better. Stop.
I did that so well.
And there we have a negative
Oh,
test.
look, can I just show that?
You can show that.
Can I just show that? Look. I'm 001. Could I be 001 instead of 007? Could I be?
Well,
could I be? Could I?
no,
That's
probably
good.
not.
Thank you.
So that's a negative test.
Okay.
And so if you are blowing and it goes over, what is over? So if I would say I'd had a test and I had a couple of drinks,
Yep.
what's to get away with it? How much do
Well,
I...
nowadays,
Hang on, is that the right expression, Janice? To
What?
get away with it?
No, I'm just saying, yeah, but you know, if you've been out to lunch and had a glass of wine, there's no harm in that.
Yep.
So what point do you get to when you're in trouble?
So the alcohol reading that determines whether you're over nowadays, it's quite varied. So commonly for a fully licensed driver, it's an offence at 0.05 or above. But if you're a learner driver, provisional driver, driver of a taxi, public vehicles, heavy vehicle industry, your limit is 0.
0.
Yeah.
So
I can go and drive a truck now.
absolutely.
I don't have a licence.
So if this is only a screening device, it's not the final result, but it's an indicator to us. So if we've got a reading of 0.05 and above, is telling us that there's alcohol in the system and you've likely committed an offence.
Yep.
If the instrument is telling me that it's a 0.03 reading, what we will do at that point is question you in respect to your licence. Do you have your licence with you? What sort of licence is it? If it's a fully licensed driver, we would give you some advice in respect to drinking, let you know what the limit is. You know obviously what you've consumed, but you're perfectly legal to drive. And obviously if you produce if you're driving a heavy vehicle or you're on a P licence or an L licence, you will commit an offence.
Okay.
Well, let's do the drug test because that takes a little while to do its thing, doesn't it?
Yes. So the drug test, this is a single consumable. Again, it's a screening device that we do at the roadside. So this device tests for methamphetamine, ecstasy and cannabis. Methamphetamine, commonly known as crystal meth, speed, or ice, are the common street names. So in doing the test, what we need you to do is with your tongue is wipe it around the insides of your mouth, around your cheeks and your teeth, and I need you to do that for me now. So.
Oh. Well,
beautiful. So see those two pads there?
Yep.
What I need you to do is take that, run it down the length of your tongue.
These pads here.
Those two pads
Yep.
are going to touch your tongue, and I need you to lick it for me once, just like licking an ice cream.
Okay.
Just like that. Yep. Right down the length of your tongue, and do it for me once more. Hold it on your tongue, right down.
Do you have to make that noise too?
Okay, and hand that back to me. That's excellent. And then what we need to do is activate what's called a buffer solution with that. This is called an immunoassay test, and the test will take 3 minutes to run.
Okay.
Now let's just talk
So we'll
amongst
just
ourselves.
put it down
Yep,
there
so
and talk
we'll
amongst
set that down there until it's run.
So I feel sorry for the poor guys out on the road in the cold weather having to do this, and also fronting up to the cars and, you know, getting people to react to you. It's most of the, because you're really generally very polite and we all know why you need to be there, but what happens? What are the odd things that happen? How do people try and skirt the tests?
Well, by and large, the community is very accepting to this testing. You know, we know that 99% of the people that we stop have absolutely done nothing wrong. But it's one of those requirements of having a driver's licence is that you know you're going to be undergoing this testing because it is a road safety issue. Generally, from an alka test perspective, there's not too many ways around it. As you started off, you blew really hard, and the instrument told me that we're not doing this test. He's blowing too hard.
Yep.
So
just why does blowing too hard affect it though? What's the?
It needs what
A steady stream, is it?
Steady stream, because at the end of the day, we're looking for that exchange of alcohol between your blood and breath that happens in the alveolar areas of the lungs. So we want that last bit of breath. So we need you to blow out long and slow for the instrument to be able to capture that.
That's because we're actors and we learn how to breathe hard to get volume in our voice.
There we go.
I thought you were actually blowing into a trumpet or something the way
well,
you blew into that one.
So how people will try and perhaps get around that is that they perhaps won't blow at all, they'll refuse, or they'll try and blow differently or not enough. And the instrument needs to get that volume. The instrument measures that volume, and we know if we don't have that volume because the instrument won't run the test.
So how many times can you try to blow?
So we will generally give people 2 or 3 times if they're generally trying. If the behaviour continues, we will start giving people a warning that if they don't comply with our directions, they can commit an offence.
Because there's a bit of funny business going on.
Yes, and then we'll give them further opportunities to try. In respect to drug testing, basically people, and as I said to you, I'll get you to run that down your tongue a second time, and you probably weren't aware, but the first time it actually wasn't touching your tongue too well. And that's a common thing that we see in respect to drug testing, is that when people take the collector and put it in their mouth, they'll give the indication of wipe and give it back to us, but it hasn't actually touched their tongue.
Right.
And there's actually an indicator on the device that tells us whether it's sufficient saliva or not.
Okay. Sufficient saliva.
Sufficient saliva.
Now, is it long enough? Have we got we've got one we prepared earlier.
Yep. So here's one
mine.
that's run the time, and what you'll see is
this isn't mine. I just want to be clear. This isn't mine, is it?
No, this is a negative test. So
this is a negative test.
So what we have here is there's 2 red lines in the windows that we see there. On camera, you're probably picking up the words cannabis and methamphet, which relates to the drugs that this tests for.
Right.
And those 2 lines must always appear to tell us that this test has worked correctly, and they're called control lines.
Right. And if they're not there.
So if they're not there, the test hasn't worked properly. So after the 3 minutes, if no lines have appeared, we would need to conduct the test again.
Oh, right, okay.
In this case, the lines are there, so the test has worked and the test is negative. What we're actually looking for within that window is the appearance of a second line. And that second line, and my understanding is it's just like a pregnancy test, will indicate that it's a positive test of which we will then take the next steps.
So if somebody has done the wrong thing and they know they've done the wrong thing, what's the next thing that happens?
So what happens here in South Australia is that where someone returns a positive test, these are only screening devices. So what we do, we need a confirmatory sample which is analysed by a laboratory for drug testing. Right. So we will collect a sample of oral fluid at the roadside, and that's packaged up for the laboratory. It goes off to the Forensic Science Centre.
Right, so you need to spit into something to get
Well, there's not so much spit, but there's a swab that collects.
swab, okay.
That collects a volume of oral fluid, which creates the sample that we send to the laboratory.
Okay.
So that person then has to leave their car.
Yep, so what will happen at that point, they haven't committed an offence at that point. We need to wait until we get that laboratory result, but they will get directions not to drive.
Right.
So directions not to drive for 24 hours. It doesn't affect their licence as a police direction. It's given formally and in writing, and that sample will be packaged and sent off to the laboratory. After that 24 hours, that person can, providing they haven't consumed any more substances, and that's a decision that they need to make themselves around their fitness to drive. But from a formal police direction, that 24 hours will end, and they will be free to drive. And then we take action against the sample once it comes back from the laboratory.
Gotcha. Stay with us because we're going to talk in a moment to another gentleman who's going to really pose the question, why don't we quite get it right? We'll be back in a minute.
So our next guest, Matt Hanton.
The gentleman I referred to earlier.
Welcome to the program, Matt.
Thank you.
Matt is the Manager of Road Safety Communications and Engagement Motor Accident Commission.
Correct.
Did I get that right?
You've got it right.
It's quite a title, Matt.
It is. Matt and Mac. Gets confusing.
Okay. So what is, why aren't people responding sufficiently to the messages that are going out about, let's start with drink driving?
I mean, drink driving's improved over, the last decade. We've seen some significant improvements in that. So, cultural change is there. It's become socially unacceptable to get behind the wheel. And people are starting to call other people out on it. So, and people do, from the research we do, they know that they feel ashamed the morning after as to, oh, gee, I got away with that. Oh, that was lucky. So we're seeing a significant improvement in that area, but it's been, really overtaken by drugs. And that's where we need to make sure we get the cultural change. We need people to start to understand that drug taking and then driving is dangerous. It impairs your ability to drive and make decisions. So it's about recognising those dangers and heeding the warnings that are out there and leaving the car behind, staying over a mate's place that night and making sure that they make smart choices.
We do enough advertising. You would think, over the years that people would have got the message by now, but still you see, particularly with phones, messaging and using your phone in the car, it's like, what have you, where have you been? What have you not seen on television? What on earth is going on in your head? How do we really get the message across? Yeah,
mobile phones and drugs are the two biggest issues, sort of the faces at the moment, and particularly the phone. It's become attached to everybody.
Yeah.
You sit at a dinner table and it's there constantly.
That's right.
People are waiting for it. If it buzzes, they're picking it up to see who it is. So that and drugs are the two big issues. Cultural change in other road safety issues. You feel naked if you get into a car without your seatbelt on now. Yeah. So again, you've seen some real positive adjustments, and it's about making those adjustments now transfer to these other issues.
I thought I might just get naked in the car.
Sorry.
That's not what he meant, is it?
No, it's not what he meant.
Just go back to the drugs and the alcohol. Really, we're talking about two things that are drugs anyway, because the alcohol is a drug in itself, and the drug taking is a drug. Why do you feel, this is a really odd, loaded question, but why do you feel as humans we feel we need to take something to have a good time? What are we missing?
Yeah, it's a tricky question because at the end of the day, drugs are illegal and you shouldn't be taking them, but people choose to. It's people, it's the choices they make. People make poor choices. Again, from where we come from...
Every culture's done that though. It's not unique to us. It's like every culture on earth takes some sort of mind-bending drug or enhancing, whatever they think enhancing means, drug.
And the beauty with alcohol is that it is legal, and you know you can do it, and you know that it's been happening for years. It's the rate in which we're seeing the drug problem increase and the taking now becoming a real issue, and we're seeing it in our roads. We're seeing it in fatal crashes.
Well, the other thing is that because it's illegal, it's all under the counter, and heavens knows what you're taking when you're taking a pill or smoking or snorting or whatever you do. But somebody who's never taken anything, for me,
and he's only started drinking a couple of years ago.
Well, that's true. The doctor said have a glass of red wine. That's where I stopped. A glass of red wine. But,
it does too.
But I don't see the need to enhance anything because I love life just as it is, sort of thing. And it's part of a cultural thing.
It's also, Malcolm, I mean, if you go to overseas, Amsterdam, how do they deal with that problem there? Because it's legal. It's also, my son's in Canada at the moment, and I saw a photograph today, posted, of a sign outside of something, I can't remember exactly, but obviously it was a cafe that had all that stuff for sale. So, I mean, how would they test people that are then? Well, it's like, well, they do it every day.
Busy night tonight, we're out the front of.
Road safety, I mean, it's a global problem. You hit it on the head. We're not talking about a problem that's isolated to Australia.
No.
So again, it's recognising the dangers. It's recognising how your behaviour is impacted by other choices you make, and making sure that you're making smart choices every time you get behind the wheel. Not sometimes. People think that I'll be okay, but it's not. It's not true. Sometimes, it's every time.
Every time.
Because if we eliminate the poor choices that we see in most cases on our road, we could eliminate road trauma overnight. But again, it's about people making smart choices and choosing to undertake driving the way it should be.
Do you think there's an Australian cultural thing about trying to beat the system? Do you think that's, do you think that's part of our so-called DNA, that it's all like a big joke?
I'll be right, mate.
Yeah, you'll be right, mate. You'll be able to drive, you'll be fine.
I think that's probably changed over the years, where it is becoming unacceptable. And we've seen that, like I said earlier, in that drinking environment. Our ad messages, we do a lot of research. There's a lot of insight as to what type of message is going to change someone's behaviour. And the latest message was all around social shaming, because it came back and that's what the insight was there for.
Well, that's what the ads that are running at the moment are saying that. But just get back to, how did you discover that? What did you do? How did you find out whether people were ashamed at the end of the day?
So for every issue, it's we get a room, we get people in that room who will admit to undertaking that behaviour, whether it's drug driving, drink driving, using a mobile phone, speeding, whatever the issue, we bring them together and we probe them. We get the insight as to why they think it's okay to do that. Then from that, we'll go away, we'll test, we'll build some campaigns, we'll take those back to that same group of people and test to see which ones are resonating with them and which ones are actually starting to trigger the right reactions that we need to see that behaviour change.
So it's market research in itself, isn't it?
It is, and then ultimately we'll land on a campaign, and then that's the one that goes to market. And there's a lot of research that sits around that to get to that point, but there's also ongoing research to make sure that it's having the impact that we desire.
When we watch,
I tell you, sorry, can I interrupt for a minute? The campaign that was on recently, or it might have been even last year, was the children that were dressed up, and there's like a little girl in pearls, and I only had one glass of champagne, and then to the plumber or whatever, tradesman. And I think that really hit home for a lot of, it hit home for me. I'm looking at these children thinking, that's really clever, the way that was put together.
And it was really, really successful for us. We've now moved the campaign into its next phase, and we've, in the testing, we identified that people aren't aware of the longer term implications of a drink driving conviction. They think, if I get caught, I'll lose my licence for a few months. I can work around that, but it's not. It's the lasting impact. South Australia, the conviction stays with you for at least 10 years.
Well, you've got a criminal record then, haven't you? If you've
there's something even more serious involved here. Last week we were talking to a guest about dementia, and he brought up the point that alcohol can actually bring on early set dementia because it causes the brain to shrink as well. So, we've got to not just think about our living at the moment, it's our long-term living with all of these things. Drugs, or marijuana particularly, having a similar effect and so on. So it's probably a life concern that we need to get people to understand moderation in most things is okay.
Exactly right. And no matter what you're doing, it's about moderation. But you know, at the end of the day, when we bring this all back to your behaviour behind the wheel, it's about making sure that the choice is there. You've got respect for other people you're sharing the road with.
Sure.
They're not expecting you to be getting behind the wheel having consumed alcohol or drugs.
No.
Somebody once said to me, you've got to remember when you're driving, learning to drive, this was about learning to drive, when you're learning to drive, you're driving an instrument that will kill people.
There's a real underestimate, you know, expectation of the dangers in which the vehicle presents. People think, oh, it's a car, I do it every day. But again, it's one of the most dangerous things that people will do in their life. And again, it's about making sure you're making smart choices. A car passing at 100 kilometres, moving in each direction, you know, you're talking less than a metre gap between. People don't believe that that's dangerous. They don't view it dangerous. It's extremely dangerous.
Because you feel so safe within the cabin. That's the reality, isn't it? You don't think, this could happen to me.
No.
And it does. That cabin then gives you that additional, you know, sense of security.
False sense,
and that's where the accident happens. We see people taking chances, making poor choices, taking risks, and so easily a crash you can walk away from it, but also that crash could be fatal.
Do you think that they actually do enough in schools to educate our young people? You know, say just before they're about to get a licence, maybe around 15, 16, that there should be more education in the schools?
You know, at MAC we partner with a lot of different organisations, being SAPOL and the fire service and alike, to be able to deliver road safety education. So nearly 100,000 school kids went through our programs last financial year.
Yep.
So what we find is that we've got a program that starts from reception, goes all the way through to year 12. And it's about exposing people at the right time to the right message. So the reception-based program is about crossing the road. It's about wearing a seatbelt. It's about, you know, not distracting others in the car. And then you progress through to that point in time where you're about to get a licence, and then the real dangers that are confronting you with the choices you make, actually controlling that vehicle.
Do you know, I always say to kids, are you learning to drive yet? And they look at you like, what? I'm only 10. And I say, but you should be learning to drive. You should be learning where the streets are, how to get home, what controls there are on a car, because the earlier we learn those things and embrace the knowledge of being in a vehicle on the road, I think it's not about steering the car, it's about knowing where the car is going. It's about checking mum's put her seatbelt on, or you know, that she maybe isn't drinking, but whatever. Look, stay with us. We'll be back in a moment, because there's a lot more to talk about in both of the subjects we've covered in this episode. Welcome back. We just left you before just talking about children being educated. So how can we improve the education of kids and families to look after their kids and give them that knowledge?
Yeah, we're certainly doing a lot in schools at the moment, but again, it's about leading by example. Every time you're in the car with a young person, it's about driving properly, setting that example, not using your phone, not speeding, you know, making sure that when they start to be following the lead that you're setting, that it's a positive lead.
Because kids are learning from parents all the time.
Oh, consistently. And you see it in school zones where a parent will quickly run across the middle of the road instead of walking the extra 10 metres to the crossing. So it's about constantly, every time you're engaging with the road, do it safely. That young person in your life is going to understand how to do it properly. And again, when they then grow, you know, you've put them on the right path.
Peter, also, just penalties for committing an offence.
Yes.
What are the penalties?
And they can be significant. So if we're looking at alcohol, there's three ranges of penalties depending on your level. So up to 0.079, you're looking at an on-the-spot fine, which is above $600. You're going to lose some demerit points.
Yep.
If you there victims of crime levy added
there's
to
victims of crime levy of $60 on an on-the-spot notice. But once you're really in trouble once you hit the 0.08 mark. So 0.08 up to 0.149, you're going to lose your car on the spot. It's going to go on a tow truck. You're going to get an immediate loss of licence on the spot, and that's going to be for a minimum of 6 months. You're going to find yourself in court, and you're looking at penalties of $1,000 or more up. If you hit the 0.15 mark, which is significant again, all those things happen. You're going to lose your licence on the spot, but it's going to be 12 months, not 6 months. And these are just for first offences. Your car's going to be put on the back of a truck. and once again, the penalties increase before the courts. But what's more is once you do ultimately get your licence back, then you're liable to mandatory alcohol interlock.
Listen, we have to go on that
Yes.
final thing. Just remember, folks, take care of yourself for the future. So till next time we meet, keep yourself nice. Till then, thank you guys
Thank you very much.
See you
Thank
soon.
you.